Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Hey, Chicago. What do you say? Cubs gonna win today.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. We're going to talk baseball with National Baseball expert David Brown. Dave, how are you? I forgot, I didn't come up with a pithy question for you. Who's your favorite interim manager of all time?
It's a good question. Probably Tony Mansolino, the interim manager of the Baltimore Orioles, just because he's the newest.
The correct answer is John Vukovic.
Oh, of
Got
course.
to do it twice for, I think, a total of 2 games. Literally just keep the seat warm. Vuk, just, don't fuck it up today. And tomorrow we'll get you a new boss. Thanks. The Cubs brought back their, I call him the prodigal third baseman. Matt Shaw has returned. When they sent him down in the middle of April, he was struggling. He was hitting 174, I think. And in the 20-some games that he was gone, nobody did any better. Third base is literally... I need to look this up. It's the Cubs third base is the second worst position offensively in baseball. And I don't know who the worst is. I need to find that out. Shouldn't it be catcher somewhere? Aren't your catchers supposed
are better
to
than they used to
hit?
be.
Yeah.
Catchers are in a good. They're peaking right now.
So to put this into context, Shaw played 18 games for the Cubs and then was gone for 24. He had a double last night in his third at bat, which regained the team lead among third basemen with extra base hits to 3. John Birdie had 2 while he was gone. That was it. The long saga of the Cubs hotshot prospect getting off to a bad start apparently was he's got a weird batting stance. He likes to shake his fanny at the pitcher before just to try to confuse them, and then he has this really big leg kick, and he decided on his own in the winter. He's like, you know what, this leg kick might be a little too high for big league pitching. They're going to be throwing harder. So he worked all winter on not getting rid of the leg kick or reducing it, but simply getting everything started quicker. And then he shows up at spring training and he pulls an oblique, misses most of spring training, is ready the last week just a few days before the Cubs go to Japan. The Cubs have nobody else to play at third base. So they're like, you're fine. And he just claimed that he never could get his timing figured out. He hadn't played enough games in spring training. He'd messed with his swing, and this was an enlightening stat I had in the newsletter this morning. Of the 258 players who Baseball Savant has exit velocity on for this year, Matt Shaw, 257th. Only Jose Iglesias hits the ball softer than Matt Shaw. And that was not a thing for Matt, like in the minors. He's a career 301 hitter in the minors with a 388 on base and a slugging of almost 500. Like, he can hit. So Cubs basically said, look, we're going to send you to Iowa. Just go down and play for a while. Get your stuff together and you can come back. And he's like, okay. So he went down and he did the typical thing. He struggled for a little bit and then he got hot. And when they brought him back, there were a bunch of stories. Like Sahadev wrote one in The Athletic about the Cubs convinced him to reduce his leg kick, not quite as high. Now, he's been down there for 24 games. When do you think the Cubs asked Matt to lower the leg kick?
A few days ago.
Saturday. So 2 games of that, and they're like, all right, you're fixed. Let's go. So my head, it just brought so many questions to my mind. Like, if you knew you wanted him to do that, why didn't you have him do it right away? Or maybe I could see, just from a psychological thing, let him go down there, let him get a few games under his belt, and then make a change. Just be like, okay, just get a few hits, and then we're going to refine it. Or if it was as easy as that, why not just do it when he was still with the Cubs? If you think he only needs 2 days to figure it out, maybe just do this, bench him for a couple of days and bring him back. I don't understand them.
When we talk to pitchers about, I think it's pitchers, maybe it's hitters too, but when we talk to pitchers, certainly about making changes in how they throw during the season, they talk about how difficult it is, and they do most of that stuff in the off season. But once the games start, for whatever reason, they talk about how difficult it is to change on the fly effectively. So I think I am not making excuses or whatever for them, but I think it was just a matter of they're afraid to make things worse by changing it at all, and then things got so bad that they're like, all right, the heck with it, just do it. Now, I don't know.
Well, I get that. I agree with that. But
yeah.
To me, it's just the weird thing about, like, telling him on Saturday, maybe don't, let's lower the leg kick a little, and then recalling him on Monday. Like, okay, it's all fixed.
Yeah.
It worked last night. They look like geniuses after we hit 2 hits, hit the ball hard both times. But it just feels like it's, this is the same week that we got the report that the Bears last year, there would be times when Caleb Williams would go to watch film and no one would tell him what to look for on the film. Just like sit in the room and watch. Here's the clicker. Just sit and look at it. It's kind of felt like that.
Did it have to be a Bears game even that he was watching?
That's right. He was watching Raising Arizona. This is really good. Did you see the John Gurley? He literally crawled out of the mud. No, Caleb, you're supposed to be watching the Lions. Oh,
where can I get balloons that blow up into funny shapes?
I don't know. It was round, funny. I think my favorite part of that is they're like, you get on the ground and you count backwards from 1,000. And we're going to come back. We're going to check. The old guy gets down and I forget what number it is. He starts counting backwards. And you hear him counting, and then they cut to them in the car and they're driving. And they realize they've left the baby. And they slam on the brakes and spin the car around. And then you see the old guy finally stand up and goes, oh, bullshit. And he looks out the window and they're coming back. He gets on the ground and starts counting again. I do think the moment that made me laugh the hardest, though, is when H.I. has stolen the Huggies. He gets in, he hijacks the truck. The guy goes, son, do you know you got a panty on your head? But the cop shoots the windshield out of the truck. And then later they slam on the brakes and H.I. flies through the windshield, but there's no windshield. He cracks me up every time. Let's just talk Raising Arizona first.
Yeah, really. I think my favorite line in that movie actually was about the balloons, unless round is funny. I think my second favorite line is when the dad, unpainted Huff Hines, says, I don't know, he's wearing jammies. They had Yodas and shit on him.
Nobody sleeps naked in this house. I also like the fact they don't immediately know which kid it is. Which one? Right. Nathan Jr., I think. So yeah, they have 7 of them. That's why Holly Hunter decided they could take one. They got abundance of babies. They won't
there
even
are worse reasons.
Yeah. Anyway, so Cubs have fixed third base. We're all ready to go now.
Yeah,
The
even when did Christopher Morel leave?
just before the trade deadline last year.
Right. He's not hitting either. So even if they had kept him around, he also would not be playing well at
Well,
third base. So.
third base has only been a gaping hole for 3 full seasons, so I don't know why they. I mean, 3 full. Well, they're actually supposedly trying to win. Don't know why they would have thought that could be an issue.
Would it have made any sense? I know he didn't play well there because he's not playing there anymore. But Michael Busch.
Well, it's funny that you say that because we talk. So Ian Happ's injury, which he may come back tonight against the Marlins. They called up Moises Ballesteros, the guy we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And Ballesteros is a catcher, supposedly. He knows how to put the equipment on. They've taught him how to put the equipment on. Whether he can actually catch or not, nobody's really sure. He always looks like he's squatting. So maybe that's why they just think he's... Get out of the crouch. What? Oh, you're standing up? Never mind.
That's just my posture.
But he also can play a little first base. And by that, I mean a little because he's 5'8". Right after they called him up, people spotted Michael Busch taking ground balls at third base.
Uh-huh.
But it appears that the fix instead was, let's just bring Shaw back. And Ballesteros can go back to Iowa when Happ comes back.
Right.
I mean, they needed to call Shaw back up at some point. Number one, he was hitting. I mean, if you're getting no offense out of third base and there's a guy hitting at Iowa, you don't really need those hits at Iowa. I mean, God bless the people of Des Moines, but nobody really cares what the Iowa Cubs record is. It's not doing you any good having him get hits in Iowa. But you got to give him a nice stretch of games here to see if you need to go trade for a third baseman. I mean, he's basically auditioning for the rest of the season by coming back. I don't know. Their shopping list is long enough. They don't have a bullpen, as was evidenced last night when the great Porter Hodge is now going on the injured list, and so they tried to close with Daniel Palencia. That didn't work. But I got Ryan Presley pitching in the 6th, which is fun for everybody. That's just so if he gives up 9 runs again, they have 3 more at-bats to try to catch up.
Thinking.
We can't have you go last anymore. That's not going to work. So it would be nice if they don't have to go out and get a third baseman, but they might have to. And then it becomes a very remember this crap segment, but when we were kids growing up, that was always the thing, right? The Cubs haven't had a third baseman since Ron Santo.
Sure.
We've debunked that rumor because Bill Madlock existed. And won 2 batting titles in 3 years.
and Ron Say was pretty good.
Yes, right. It was not, and Mike Donahue and I identified that center field has been the gaping hole for the Cubs forever. Like they just didn't have. I mean, honestly, Pete through 2 months is probably the 3rd best center fielder in Cubs history. That was the spot they could never fill for more than like a year. Except Rick Monday had been like the last guy who was relatively competent for several years in a row, and then Dexter Fowler was, but Dexter was only there for 2 years. Bob Dernier was only healthy for 1. Jerome Walton was good for 2/3 of 1 season. It was just a mess. And then we get into the whole idea that part of the bad-mouthing the Cubs' third baseman was the Ron Santo Hall of Fame candidacy.
Okay.
Just remind him, there hasn't been a single good one since me. Well, there have been. No, that's not what we're talking about. Okay, fine, Ron. They're the last good third baseman they've ever had. Speaking of former Cubs, Brandon Hyde is now a former Oriole. Somebody had to take the fall for the horrendous start to the season of the Orioles. And it wasn't going to be Mike Elias. So it ended up being Brandon Hyde, who had quite a run with the Orioles. He kind of the rare manager who survived the rebuild.
Yeah.
Usually they're you're Dale's fame. You get all the losses and then you get shoved out the door. Does anybody know if Brandon was ever any good?
It's always a good question. Is this manager any good? I don't know how we find that out. You know, it's almost like an accident that we find out. One thing I did notice following the Orioles early in the season was their beat reporters and I think we've talked about this actually, would talk about, well, this is the lineup again. And, it was always, tweets were sort of tinged with that, like, well, this guy's playing. And then they'd ask him about it. And he's like, yeah, the front office signed these guys, so we're going to play them half the time or whatever. So I couldn't tell if it was like letting everybody know that it wasn't his idea, or he was being earnest about it and saying, well, this is an organization and these guys were brought in, so we're going to play them. And so I don't know if that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I mean, nobody was performing anyway, hardly. So I don't know exactly what they were missing. So, but Mike Elias is he's just a hardcore guy about a way to build a team, I guess. And they refuse to put any money really into the pitching staff. And on top of that, let Corbin Burns go, which might have been a smart thing to do. His peripheral stats they're kind of iffy, and I don't know that I would have paid him $200 and blah blah $million either. But maybe bringing in Max Fried or something would have been the right thing. Maybe that would have worked. But they're just not willing to spend David Rubenstein's money.
I mean, it seems like the free agent pitching is always a crapshoot. And so if you're like, we don't want to rely on going out and signing free agent pitchers. They had all these hotshot prospects. And then they did use some to get Burns, but that's like the only time they did it. And it felt like when the White Sox put Garrett Crochet up for auction, it was like, well, it's inevitable, right? That the White Sox and Orioles would just work out a trade. Because if you're the Sox, the best way to, get some position players in your system is to go to like the, basically the Orioles position player thrift shop and pick a few and then do that. And the Red Sox ended up getting him instead. And their pitching it's abysmal. It's not just like kind of bad. It's terrible. They ended up having to, in spring training, go get Kyle Gibson. I'm sure Kyle has outpitched his numbers because he's got a 16.7 ERA. I mean, I think he's probably like he's more like a 14 ERA guy, not a 16. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. That's a 13 xFIP right there.
That's Cub fans will remember. That's 4 Brian Mattis starts is what that is.
Another Oriole of the past as well. Yeah, they were. You could tell that they were sort of hanging on a string. They were relying on Grayson Rodriguez, one of their pitching prospects, who has been hurt a lot, and they have made the trade for Burns. I remember they gave up Ortiz in that deal, Joey Ortiz, and I can't remember who else, which tells you something. That was a good trade, but they made a couple others. They tried to trade for Trevor Rogers. Well, I mean, they did trade for Trevor Rogers. And that was, Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby. But these are guys, they had a lot of prospects, and the Orioles were never trading their best prospects. They had a very deep farm system, and they were trading guys who were kind of down the list. And Crochet would have made a lot of sense, and I don't know, if they would have made another Burns type deal to get Crochet, I don't know how much that would have hurt their farm system. And I at some point, what good does your farm system do if it's not helping the major league team win games one way or another? So.
Yeah, that's the whole point of having it. But then the pitching has been terrible. But you get to 15 and 28 or whatever they are, 15 31. Also because you don't hit. I mean, Adley Rutschman, 208. He's got an 86 OPS plus. Ryan Mountcastle has a 71. Like when
Gunnar Henderson started slow and is still, he's still not. He's better, but he's not. Yeah, he's at the top of the list.
253, 302, 462. That's an MVP candidate, and he's not playing anywhere near that yet. They finally found a spot for Heston Kjerkstad, and maybe we see why they were so hesitant. He's saying 211. They got Tyler O'Neill was like their big. That was like a head scratcher. Like you got all these outfielders and you go out and sign one. It didn't matter because he's always hurt. He's hitting 188. Right. He did hit an opening day home run though, right? Wasn't that the most important thing?
It is. It is.
Every year he's got to hit an opening day home run
with history. Yes.
And then he can take the rest of the season off because he did his thing.
Well, they had and it's funny, they had Anthony Santander, who they let go in free agency, an outfielder. Brought in Tyler O'Neill, who misses at least 75 games a year because of an injury, usually. But Santander's not hitting either. So, it's I don't know if that means that the Orioles are cursed because everybody they could have brought in. I mean, Crochet's been good, but they should have traded for him. You're right. But
so their interim manager is Tony Mansolino, who Chicago listeners, which probably everybody will remember. Well, they won't remember, but they might remember Doug Mansolino, his dad, fiery third base coach. Should you be known, like when people think of your third base coach, should be known as getting in fights? Is that you notice the Legoo boys never tried to go over third base? They went over first. They were going to mess with Doug Mansolino.
That was the Royals staff.
I know.
That was yeah.
But I mean, they didn't even hang out over there because Doug would have spotted them.
Right. It would have been near the White Sox dugout, and Doug Mansolino would have, I believe, ripped their throats out with his teeth. Yes.
And it's funny. I watched a replay of it because the first thing I think of with Doug Mansolino is the fight he got in with Phil Garner. Garner was managing the Brewers, and in my mind, this was a brawl. This was like the old. Remember the Robert Fick brawl
where I was at that game.
Bloody nose and all that stuff. Nothing happened in that one. It was just two guys with bad mustaches screaming at each other. And then a bunch of guys wandering around, and I got to see John Jaha on the field, so I got all tingly about that. That was fun. Joe Kamak came running out of the bullpen in full catcher gear. That was great. Nothing happened. But Hawk, the clip I watched was Hawk calling it on WGN. And even back then, he was screaming. I know he thought he could hear. He probably could. He's yelling at the umpire because the umpire threw Mansolino out, but didn't throw out Phil Garner. And Hawk is super pissed.
Yeah.
He's yelling, calling him up by the first name. That's terrible. You got to throw him out too. It's like, Hawk, calm down. So I don't know if Tony is as fiery as his dad. I don't know that it matters. I do know that we still live in a world where teams try to replace one style of guy with a different style of guy, as if that's going to be Brandon Hyde, pretty easygoing dude.
Yeah.
Maybe I feel like they need a little, and looking at Tony, it would be little. They need a little fire in the dugout. So we'll see if any performative running out and screaming, get himself thrown out of games. I wonder, do they for Orioles managers, do they still take their jersey and sew that little pocket for them to keep their cigarettes in? Or is that they don't do that anymore when Earl Weaver left?
That would be great if that was a thing with the
just
organization.
The tradition.
The ceremonial.
For those of you who don't know,
area.
Earl had a little pocket sewn, like on when you button up your jersey, between like the second and third button, there was a little like horizontal pocket that fit his smokes. Sometimes when he ran out to argue with an umpire, you could see the smoke. You could see the little indent, like Schneider from One Day at a Time. Earl didn't have it rolled up in his sleeve. He had it sticking out of his jersey. That was a different time.
So he didn't only smoke when Don Stanhouse was pitching. I think he blamed Don Stanhouse for that because he made him so nervous with walks and whatever.
I think John Lowenstein drove him to drink, not just smoke.
But not Gary Renicky. That's why they platooned him.
Right. He couldn't tell the difference. That's why they had to put their names on the uniforms so that he'd know who was who. Lowenstein, in one of Jay Johnstone's books, he writes about late in the season, a lost season for the Orioles. Lowenstein is running to the wall to chase down a ball. and he jumps, and he does catch the ball, but he smacks into the wall. It almost kills himself. He just hits it as hard as he can. He's laying on the warning track, and he doesn't get up. He just lays there. And the ump runs out, and he sees he's got the ball. He calls the guy out, and then the trainer runs out, and they start waving frantically, and they bring like a stretcher. And they bring the stretcher out, and they put one, not like one the guys have to carry. It's like pallbearer style. They got to have like two guys on each side, and they're carrying Lowenstein back, and they get to second base, and he hops up off. He still has the ball. He still has the ball in his glove. He hops off the stretcher and holds his arms in the air and shows everybody the ball and just runs into the dugout. He apparently faked. He said he realized, I hit the wall and thought, damn, that hurt. And I laid there for a while. And then when the trainer came out, I'm like, I think I'll just milk this for what it's worth. So he wasn't injured. He convinced them to carry him on. They knew when they were carrying him on the stretcher that he was okay. And he gets to the infield, this hushed crowd, and he gets up and he goes jumping around. We need more of that.
I didn't know that story. I love it, though.
Yeah.
They should have got the bullpen card for him. Maybe he can't lay flat in it.
There was a story about in the Washington Post, I think, about goober-faced Derek Law, reliever for the Nationals.
He does have that face.
And his unlikely fan club, these three kids in Ohio who were playing MLB The Show and like got a Derek Law like pack one day, and they were making fun of the fact, look, we got Derek Law, and they've decided it's kind of like, this is a thing I would have done as a kid. I mean, the guy who's, I talked myself into loving Luis Valbuena for years as an adult. They became the Derek Law fans, and they all went out and got different uniforms of Derek Law, like one from the Giants and one from one from the Nats, one from whatever. And they went to a game to try to meet him, and he didn't see him or whatever, but then he found out. So he found out who, I guess on social media, he saw who they were. And so he sent them, he said, come back. And he gave him tickets, and then he went down and he signed their autographs or whatever. And they talked about, it's so fun. It's kind of a fun story. The journeyman pitcher who these guys adopted as their favorite player or whatever. But the thing I took from it is Derek still is the only player who still uses the bullpen card. They have one in Washington, and they let anybody want to use it, and he's the only one who uses it.
They've tried to a few years ago. A few more guys did it. They tried to make it a thing again, just for the kitsch value of the funny-looking golf cart coming in. But I remember Glenn Perkins on the Twins. He sort of bemoaned the lack of a bullpen card. He sort of wished that they had it in his era, because he always thought it was cool when they come in and use it. So it should be an option just in case.
Who was the big Reds pitcher who used to sprint?
Was it Ted Power or Brad Leslie?
Yeah, I remember Brad Leslie. They should have had him race the bullpen card or the freeze.
I don't know if it was either one of those guys.
They could have done that in a game in Atlanta. He could have raced the freeze to the mound.
Oh, my hamstring.
I think they should still use the cart. But the pitcher who, if they take you out of the game, part of your penance is you have to drive out to the bullpen and pick up your replacement and drive him back. So the manager comes out, he takes the ball, but he hands you the keys. And you have to go over and get in the bullpen cart, and you have to go pick up, go pick up your replacement. I don't want you to go do it. Okay. That would speed things up. Every pitching change takes 15 minutes. If I forgot to charge the battery, you're going to have to push the cart then. What? Yeah, I'm not the one who loaded the bases with one out. Oh, fine. Speaking of big relief pitchers, Jose Alvarado is on the... he flunked his PED test. And they're not saying that he didn't flunk the test because he took like Ozempic or whatever, but they talk about how his motivation was to lose weight.
Right.
And so he was doing all kinds of different workout stuff. And he apparently was down 14 pounds from 264 to 250. And now he's down 80 games and no playoffs because he flunked his his PED test. And it puts the Phillies in a bind because now they have to go they not only have to find somebody to replace him, but they're going to have to find somebody to replace him for the playoffs because he's not going to be there. And I don't know what I want to talk about this other than the fact that I found the headlines all misleading because they all talked about how he's wanted to lose weight and he flunked a test. And you're like, well, what are the fat drugs are illegal? That's like, no, they're not illegal. He didn't use one to do it. I don't.
So we can't. There's a disconnect here between
yes,
whatever drugs he said he needed and whatever's in these steroid type drugs. I mean, are the amphetamines against the rules? Because I mean, those are used as weight loss drugs. Maybe there's a connection in there somehow. I don't know.
I don't know. Do they test for amphetamine or did they just they made him take him out of the clubhouse?
I can't say. Yeah, the machine. They made the machine go like cigarette machines.
I mean, they used to literally clubbies would make a pot of coffee with amphetamines in it.
Right.
They had like leaded and unleaded. They would literally mark it like leaded and unleaded. It didn't mean caffeinated and decaf. It meant caffeine. It meant caffeine, and then the other one was amphetamine. I don't know. I do know that our large adult son, Kyle Schwarber, now has 300 career homers. He has hit, he had hit 147 of them with the Cubs, the Nationals, and the Red Sox. He's been with the Phillies for 3 years and a month and has 100 and however many more. What did I say? He has the rest. He has more with the Phillies than he had with those teams. And it's just a good time to remind Cub fans. I'm going to read off the long list of players that Jed Hoyer got for Kyle Schwarber. And that would be... Oh, it's nobody, because he just non-tendered him. Had to save $8 million. Why not?
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
The DH wasn't a thing yet for a whole year or something.
Yeah. You couldn't see it coming either. Hadn't been talking about it forever. I don't even want to go into I've talked about 1,000 times on 1,000 podcasts about how the Cubs' handling of the Jason Hayward contract screwed them over so many different ways. Like, yeah, you signed a bad contract. You signed a good player, paid him like a great player, and it turned out he didn't even really play that. He didn't even reach good for most of the time with your team. But it doesn't mean you had to let it like paralyze your roster and your payroll for the entire length of that deal. You know, you're a big market team. You sign a bad deal once in a while. You just paper over it. And they didn't do it.
And it's not like they didn't they got something out of Jason Hayward. I mean, it was disappointing, but if nothing else, the World Series speech. Maybe you don't win the World Series without it.
Yeah, they let it hamstring them so many ways. Because of that, they didn't have room to keep Kyle. They didn't go after Bryce Harper when Bryce Harper. They had timed Hayward's contract he had a player option after the third year, which they assumed he was going to exercise because he was going to be a star, and then they timed it with Bryce's free agency so that he could leave and they could sign Bryce, and whoa, this will be great. And then he didn't leave, and so they didn't try to sign him. And Nick Castellanos had this huge 2 months for them in 2019, and he wanted to come back, and he waited around. He wouldn't sign his contract with the Reds because he kept waiting for the Cubs to clear money, and they couldn't do it. It was just over and over again. And I think most frustrating for Cub fans is, and this is not a good reason to keep a player, but we don't care. We're fans. Kyle's fun. Like,
Yeah.
we literally just miss him because he was fun to watch. Oh, well. Oh, I should have segued to this after the Alvarado thing. But I don't want to talk a lot about it because I've been talking about it, and I want to make you talk about it for a long time. But the ridiculous decision to reinstate Pete Rose now that he's dead, because he served his lifetime ban by dying, so now he can come back.
Uh-huh.
I guess the one good thing about it is that's the way they do the Veterans Committee things now. It won't be until December of 2027 before Pete gets discussed, so we can put it off even farther. But there's always this argument that really pisses me off about, there were people who, were advocating for him when he was alive to get reinstated so he could get voted in, who basically were saying what Pete did wasn't any worse than what the steroid guys did. The steroid guys are eligible. Why isn't Pete eligible? And it's always reminded me of one of the guys in his shady, he had like these weird, especially when he returned to Cincinnati at the end of his career, and he had all these weird guys hanging around. He had the guys who ran bets for him. He had other things. He had one guy who owned a gym in Cincinnati and sold steroids in the gym. And Pete was cooked when he was in Montreal. Like, he was done. He wasn't going to get to 4,000 hits. He wasn't going to break Ty Cobb's record. And he just starts, all of a sudden he comes back to Cincinnati, starts hanging out with the guy selling steroids. But Pete is never linked to that ever by these guys. Mostly because, he didn't look like he was using them. Because he was a 40-year-old fat guy at the end of his career. But that's not how that works. If part of it is that, you're old and you play one day and you can't play the next because you're too damn sore. That's part of the reason why you use that stuff. And so, to me, there's a million reasons. There's the statutory rape. There's all kinds of creepy stuff on top of the gambling that should have ended this discussion so long ago. But the whole idea that, no, it's fine, he's back because the steroid guys are on the ballot. Pete should be on the ballot. It's like, I hate to break it to you. But, the thing that made Pete such a good player, his willingness to basically do anything, I think is why it's perfectly believable, and not even just very likely, that he's one of the steroid guys.
Yeah. He was. I think he was too. Hold on, I gotta clear my throat. Yeah, I've heard journalists talk about that before, and John Dowd, whatever he didn't get into his report, he also had suspicions about steroids, and he helped bring to light the girls, basically, that people were running to Pete during spring training. So this is not just one 14 or 15-year-old girl that he began an inappropriate relationship with, but multiple. It's not, I guess, and I wouldn't be excusing it if it was just one, but it was repeated behavior. And again, even if you want to turn a blind eye to that or to the steroid possibilities or whatever, the betting that he did on baseball tainted, compromised everything he did. If he, if there was a day that he didn't bet, that was like betting against the Reds. If there was a game where he bet $1,000 instead of $5 on the Reds, that was like a game that he was betting against the Reds. He was totally driven by the need to win at gambling, not at baseball. And that was within Manfred's statement about Rose, he said that the other dead guys on the list too, the Black Sox from 100 years ago, they too are getting off. And, you can't do anything worse than take money to throw the World Series. I mean, it's almost like a made up thing. It's hilariously, that would never happen, but it did. It literally happened. And now they're saying that, they're not saying that it was okay, but they're saying that these guys can't do any more harm to the game. And that just ain't true. It's just, I think, and why do you want to celebrate them? Why do you want to celebrate a guy like Pete Rose who has all these terrible accusations against him, in addition to the things that were proven? Charlie Hustle didn't try to win all the time. That's the thing that kills me about this. So, and you've sort of said it already. He wasn't even the thing that he was most famous for, doing anything to win. He didn't even do that.
Right.
That's the biggest lie of all time with Pete Rose.
Yeah.
So, there were games that he didn't try to win as hard as other games because of gambling.
Yep.
And it is maybe it isn't the easiest thing in the world to see or admit, but that's the truth.
Well, and Dowd had proof that Pete did bet against the Reds. That wasn't even true. His whole, I only bet on the team. But he also talked about how it would be very easy for Pete to have a system to basically signal to the other gamblers, the ones he's working with, when to bet against the Reds. And Pete could bet on them by simply betting a smaller amount.
Yes.
Taking a loss on purpose to make money for other guys, and they're all in cahoots, and they just split up the money. So basically, Pete could, say that he typically bet $500 or $600 on the Reds. If he bets 100 one day, Pete's tanking today. He's going to lose $100, but we're going to take the other side. We're going to make a bunch of money. The steroid guy that he got involved with was Tommy Giosa, who owned the Gold's Gym in Cincinnati, and they met and they started hanging out in 1978. Pete played until 86. Pete became a regular at Gold's Gym in 84 when he went back to the Reds. That was the guy that that guy ended up going to prison for, he got busted trying to sell 100 pounds of coke. They're pretty sure Pete was part of the deal. And he also got in trouble, and Pete eventually went to jail for the fact that Pete was giving Tommy some of his winning tickets to cash so that Pete wouldn't have to claim them. He wouldn't have to pay taxes on it.
Mm-hmm.
So all kinds of fun stuff. I mentioned this on a pod with Oleg and Praz. There's this podcast called The Dollop with these two comedians who look back at historical events, and right now they've just finished part 2 of a 3-part thing on Pete. I know most of the stuff they're talking about, but there is some other stuff that comes up, especially with there's some really good stories about his wife in Cincinnati sees this Porsche drive by the house,
mm-hmm.
and she's like, that's my Porsche. Well, Pete had given it, he was loaning it to this other woman that he was banging in Cincinnati, and she's just driving the car around the neighborhood. So Pete's wife went over, got in a fight with her, and stole the car back. I mean, there's like a million. It's amazing how many stories there are.
Sounds like a Sopranos episode.
Pretty much. I don't know what I want to talk about with the Dodgers, other than the fact that the Dodgers currently have 14 pitchers on the injured list. But that's not my favorite part. Andrew Friedman finally just embraced the inevitable, and one of the 14 pitchers who's on the injured list is named Kyle Hurt. It's like you create a player for the Dodgers. I'll just make a pitcher, he'll be hurt. Oh, Kyle Hurt. That's perfect. Clayton Kershaw made his triumphant return and gave up 6 runs to the Angels, which is tough to do in his first start. I kind of feel like Clayton is still on the team because he's Clayton Kershaw. and they don't want to say no. Like, Clayton, you sure you got anything left? Yeah, I could go again. Okay, fine. You can go.
Although with all their injuries, I guess.
Yeah, they need anything they can get right now.
Yeah.
He was pretty good in 23. Actually, he's more than pretty good. He was 13-5 with a 2.46 ERA, but last year he could only healthy enough to make 7 starts. And he's 37 years old. I've talked about this before about it's weird how like you wouldn't think it's a thing, but because Clayton is a Dodger and plays on the West Coast, and I don't see as many Dodger games as other games. When you have me name like the great pitchers of our era, I eventually get to Clayton, but he doesn't come to mind, top of mind, and it's ridiculous because he's a great pitcher. But it's because of his postseason blowups. Yeah. Those are the ones that stick in my mind. But one of my favorite starts of all time was one he made in Game 6 of the 2016 NLCS. I enjoyed it very much. But he didn't even really pitch that poorly in that game. But, he had like was it Matt Adams? Isn't that was it Chris Matt Adams? He hadn't given up a home run to a left-handed batter all season. And he gives up one that ends the Dodgers season to Matt Adams. And there's just stuff that was piled on top of it. But I mean, his numbers are ridiculous. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, absolutely deserved. But I can't get it out of my head. And because I get, I just love Greg Maddux. People are like, well, Maddux wasn't a good postseason pitcher. Greg Maddux's postseason ERA is less than a run higher than his regular ERA. Like his ERA is 3-something in the postseason.
It started out bad, but it got he had enough chances that
that was Will Clark's
was able
fault.
To get it down. It was.
Yeah. Fastball in. Boom. No, fastball out. That's what that goes. But Clayton's ERA is almost twice. His postseason ERA is almost twice what his regular season one is. And that, fair or not, and it's not, that's what sticks in my head.
Conversely, Madison Bumgarner's not going to sniff the Hall of Fame.
Yep. Not
going to come close. Yet, we all know what an amazing postseason pitcher he is. So, it's just one of those weird things. It is.
Well, and then there's a guy like John Lester, who is probably not a Hall of Famer, but he's got a solid regular season resume and a great postseason resume. He was a great postseason pitcher too. And so the combination of those might get him in. Because there was a time, like when he first got to the Cubs, I think he had the second lowest postseason ERA of all time. He ended up with he's 11-6 in the postseason with 2.51 ERA. And he won 3, he was on 3 World Series champions.
Before I got to vote, and it was just a thought exercise, I used to consider like a good postseason record as a plus for somebody when thinking about their Hall of Fame credentials, but I wouldn't necessarily hold a mediocre or bad postseason record against somebody. Like I wouldn't necessarily keep them out of the Hall of Fame because of it, but I might give them a few more points mentally if they were really good. So, our everybody's buddy Curt Schilling, really great postseason pitcher. I mean, he was good enough. He performed enough in the regular season, I think, but his great postseason too, I think, is a plus in his favor. Of course, there's some negatives with Curt, but
Curt is clearly not in because people don't like him.
Right. And it isn't even because of his political views, because there isn't a more...
that was just a...
conservative... Mariano Rivera, as conservative as they come, he got all the votes.
Yeah.
So that ain't it.
No, Kurt's post-playing controversy stuff, like bankrupting a state with a video game and other stuff, is just a window into what people already around baseball already suspected because he's one of the guys in the Fergie Jenkins, Greg Maddux, more than 3,000 strikeouts, less than 1,000 walks.
Mm-hmm.
So he has all the counting numbers. He doesn't have 300 wins, but and that's probably the thing people, he's only got 216 wins. But he's one of the best postseason pitchers of all time. He's got 3,000 strikeouts. He's got plenty on his resume to be in. He's just not in. That's because people don't like him. And I don't know, when it comes Veterans Committee time with Kurt, if that's going to help him or hurt him. All those guys are like, screw him. No,
I think that's what's going to happen. I think he would, if there isn't something wrong with him, if that prevents him from mending the fences, I can see if somehow he comes to a realization that he's treated people terribly and he starts an apology campaign and it appears to be legitimate, that I could see a day when a Veterans Committee maybe would forgive based on the stats. But so I don't think it's impossible, but it might be impossible for him to change his personality. So maybe it is impossible.
Right. And one of the problems they've had all along with those Veterans Committees is that a lot of those players decide that they're in. That's good enough. I like the whole the size it is. We're not going to vote for any of these guys. Oh, well. All right. Well, on that note, we didn't get to, I will talk about, they're still going to be terrible. I want to talk at some point about how the White Sox are, I think, every bit as bad as they were last year. They just have they're just fortunate enough that the Rockies are so bad. They're taking all the attention away from them.
It's only May 20th. The really, really bad part of the White Sox season last year, I don't believe had happened yet. They got off to a...
They started the season this year. After 47 games last year, they're 14-33, and this year they were also 14-33. So right on pace. Yeah. But you're right. Their bottom fell out of them last year for 2 months, and I don't think they'll lose 121 games again. But I don't know how they're going to avoid 110.
Some of losing 120 games last year was luck. So, and they certainly didn't put themselves in position to get good luck. But
no.
Many of us have herpes.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. I mean, got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much, Awesome.